Welcome to another broadcast of The Curious Mind of Raquel. I am your favorite mermaid mystic. So today we're going to continue on. We're going to do chapter 5 and chapter 6 on Little House in the Big Woods. And so I'm going to get started. Okie dokie. All right. 5 Sundays. Now the winter seemed long. Laura and Mary began to be tired of staying always in the house. Especially on Sundays, the time went so slowly. Every Sunday, Mary and Laura were dressed from skin, out in their best clothes, with fresh ribbons in their hair. They were very clean because they had their baths on Saturday night. In the summer, they were bathed in water from the spring, but in the winter time, Paul filled a heaped wash tub with clean snow, and on the cook stove it melted to water. Then close by the warm stove, behind a screen made of a blanket, over 2 chairs, Ma bathed Laura and then she bathed Mary. Laura was bathed first because she was littler than Mary. She had to go to bed early on Saturday nights with Charlotte, because after she was bathed and put into her clean nightgown, Pa must empty the wash tub and fill it with snow again for Mary's bath. Then after Mary came to bed, Ma had her bath behind the blanket and then Pa had his, and they were all clean for Sunday. On Sundays, Mary and Laura must not run or shout or be noisy in their play. Mary could not sew on her 9-patch quilt, and Laura could not knit on the tiny mittens she was making for baby Carrie. They might look quietly at their paper dolls, but they must not make anything new for them. They were not allowed to sew on doll clothes, not even with pins. They must sit quietly and listen while Ma read Bible stories to them, or stories about lions and tigers and white bears from Pa's big green book, The Wonders of the Animal World. They might look at pictures and they might hold their rag dolls nicely and talk to them, but there was nothing else they could do. Laura liked best to look at the pictures in the big Bible with its paper covers. Best of all was the picture of Adam naming the animals. Adam sat on a rock, and all the animals and birds, big and little, were gathered round him anxiously, waiting to be told what kind of animals they were. Adam looked so comfortable. He did not have to be careful to keep his clothes on because he had no clothes on. He wore only skin around his middle. Did Adam have good clothes to wear on Sundays? Laura asked Ma. No, Ma said. Poor Adam, all he had to wear was skins. Laura did not pity Adam. She wished she had nothing to wear but skins. One Sunday, after supper, she could not bear it any longer. She began to play with Jack, and in a few minutes she was running and shouting. Paul told her to sit in her chair and be quiet, but when Laura sat down, she began to cry and kicked the chair with her heels. I hate Sunday, she said. I hate Sunday. Pa put down his book. Laura, he said sternly, come here. It sounds like me. Her feet dragged as she went because she knew she deserved a spanking. But when she reached Pa, he looked at her sorrowfully for a moment and then took her on his knee and cuddled her against him. He held out his other arm to Mary and said, I'm going to tell you a story of Grandpa was a boy. The story of Grandpa's sled and the pig. When your grandpa was a boy, Laura, Sunday did not begin on Sunday morning as it does now. It began at sundown on Saturday night, and then everyone stopped every kind of work or play. Supper was solemn. After supper, Grandpa's father read aloud a chapter of the Bible while everyone sat straight and still in his chair. Then they all knelt down, and their father had said a long prayer. When he said Amen, they got up from their knees and each took a candle and went to bed. They must go straight to bed with no playing, laughing, or even talking. Sunday morning, they ate a cold breakfast because nothing could be cooked on Sunday. They all dressed in their best clothes and walked to church. They walked because hitching up the horses was work, and no work could be done on Sunday. They must walk slowly and solemnly, looking straight ahead. They must not joke or laugh or even smile. Grandpa and his 2 brothers walked ahead, and their father and mother walked behind them. In church, Grandpa and his brothers must sit perfectly still for 2 long hours and listen to the sermon. They dared not fidget on the hard bench. They dared not swing their feet. They dared not turn their heads to look at the windows or the walls or the ceiling of the church. They must sit perfectly motionless and never for one instant take their eyes from the preacher. When church was over, they walked slowly home. They might talk on the way, but they must not talk loudly, and they must never laugh or smile. At home, they ate a cold dinner, which had been cooked the day before. Then, all the long afternoon, they must sit in a row on a bench and study their catechism until the last sun went down and Sunday was over. Now, Grandpa's home was about halfway down the side of a steep hill. The road went from the top of the hill to the bottom, right past the front door. And in winter, it was the best place for sliding downhill that you can possibly imagine. One week, Grandpa and his two brothers, James and George, were making a new sled. They worked it at every minute of their playtime. It was the best sled they had ever made, and it was so long that all three of them could sit on it, one behind the other. They planned to finish it in time to slide downhill Saturday afternoon. For every Saturday afternoon, they had 2 or 3 hours to play. But that week, their father was cutting down trees in the big woods. He was working hard, and he kept the boys working with him. They did all the morning chores by lantern light and were hard at work in the woods when the sun came up. They worked till dark, and then there were chores to do, and after supper, they had to go to bed so that they could get up early in the morning. They had no time to work on the sled until Saturday afternoon, and then they worked as fast as they could, but they didn't get it finished till just as the sun went down Saturday night. After the sun went down, they could not slide downhill, not even once. That would be breaking the Sabbath. So they put the sled in the shed behind the house to wait until Sunday was over. The 2 long hours in church the next day, while they kept their feet still and their eyes on the preacher, they were thinking about the sled. At home, while they ate dinner, they couldn't think of anything else. After dinner, their father sat down to read the Bible, and Grandpa and James and George sat as still as mice on their bench with their catechism, were thinking about the sled. The sun shone brightly, and the snow was smooth and glittering on the road. They could see it through the window. It was a perfect day for sliding downhill. They looked at their catechism, and they thought about the new sled, and it seemed that Sunday would never end. After a long time, they heard a snore. They looked at their father, and they saw that his head had fallen against the back of his chair, and he was fast asleep. Then James looked at George, and James got up from the bench and tiptoed out the room through the back door. George looked at Grandpa, and George tiptoed after James. And Grandpa looked fearfully at their father, but on tiptoe he followed George and left their father snoring. They took the new sled and went quite up to the top of the hill. They meant to slide down just once. Then they would put the sled away and slip back to their bench and catechism before the father woke up. James sat in front of the sled, and then George, and then Grandpa, because he was the littlest. The sled started, at first slowly, and then faster and faster. It was running, flying down the long, steep hill, but the boys dared not shout. They must slide silently past the house without waking the father. There was no sound except the little whirl of the runners on the snow and the wind rushing past. Then, just as the sled was swooping toward the house, a big black pig stepped out of the woods. He walked into the middle of the road and stood there. The sled was going so fast it couldn't be stopped. There wasn't time to turn it. The sled went right under the hog and picked him up. With a squeal, he sat down on James, and he kept on squealing, long and loud and shrill. Squee! Squee! They flashed by the house, the pig sitting in front, then James, then George, then Grandpa, and they saw their father standing in the doorway looking at them. They couldn't stop. They couldn't hide. There was no time to say anything. Down the hill they went, the hog sitting on James and squealing all the way. At the bottom of the hill they stopped. The hog jumped off James and ran away into the woods, still squealing. The boys walked slowly and solemnly up the hill. They put the sled away. They sneaked into the house and slipped quietly in their places on the bench. Their father was reading his Bible. He looked up at them without saying a word. Then he went on reading, and they studied their catechism. But when the sun went down and the Sabbath day was over, their father took them out to the woodshed and tanned their jackets. First James, then George, then Grandpa. So you see, Laura and Mary, Paul said, You may find it hard to be good, but you should be glad that it isn't as hard to be good now as it was when Grandpa was a boy." "Did little girls have to be as good as that?" Laura asked. Paul said, "It was harder for little girls because they had to behave like little ladies all the time. Not only on Sundays, little girls could never slide downhill like boys. Little girls had to sit in the house and stitch on samplers." "Now run along and let Ma put you to bed," said Pa, and he took his fiddle out of its box. Laura and Mary lay in their trundle bed and listened to the Sunday hymns, for even the fiddle must not sing the weekday songs on Sundays. "Rock of Ages, cleft for me," Paul sang with the fiddle. Then he sang, "Shall I be carried to the skies on flowery beds of ease, while others fought to win the prize and sailed through bloody seas?" Laura began to float away on the music, and then she heard a clattering noise, and there was Ma by the stove getting breakfast. It was Monday morning, and Sunday would not come again for a whole week. That morning, when Pa came in to breakfast, he caught Laura and said he must give her a spanking. First, he explained that today was her birthday, and she would not grow properly next year unless she had a spanking. And then he spanked so gently and carefully that it did not hurt a bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, he counted and spanked slowly. 1 spank for each year. And at the last, 1 big spank to grow on. And then Pa gave her a little wooden man he had whittled out of a stick to be company for Charlotte. Pa gave her 5 little cakes, 1 for each year that Laura had lived with her and Pa. And Mary gave her a new dress for Charlotte. Mary had made the dress herself when Laura thought she was sewing on her patchwork quilt. And that night, for a special birthday treat, Pa played "Pop Goes the Weasel" for her. He sat with Laura and Mary close against his knees while he played. "Now watch," he said. "Watch, and maybe you can see the weasel pop out this time." Then he sang, "A penny for a spool of thread, another for a needle. The way the money goes." And Laura bent down close, watching, for they knew now was the time. "Pop," said Pa's finger on the spring. "Goes the weasel," sang the fiddle, plain as plain. But Laura and Mary hadn't seen Pa's finger make the string pop. "Oh, please, please, do it again," they begged him. Pa's blue eyes laughed, and the fiddle went on while he sang, "All around the cobbler's bench the monkey chased the weasel. The preacher kissed the cobbler's wife. Pop goes the weasel." They hadn't seen Pa's finger that time either. He was so quick they could never catch him. So he went laughing to bed and lay listening to Pa and the fiddle singing. Old darky, and his name was Uncle Ned, died long ago. There was no wool on top of his head in the place where the wool ought to grow. His fingers were as long as the cane in the brake. His eyes they could hardly see. And he had no teeth for to eat the hoe cake, so he had to let the hoe cake be. So hang up the shovel and the hoe, lay down the fiddle and the bow. There's no more work for Uncle Ned, for he's gone where the good darkies go. To 6. 2 big bears. Then one day, Pa said that spring was coming. In the big woods, the snow was beginning to thaw. Bits of it dropped from the branches of the trees and made little holes in the softening snowbanks below. At noon, all the big icicles along the eaves of the little house quivered and sparkled in the sunshine, and drops of water hung trembling at their tips. Pa said he must go to town to trade the furs of the wild animals he had been trapping all winter. So one evening, he made a little bundle of them. There were so many furs that when they were all packed tightly and tied together, they made a bundle almost as big as Pa. Very early one morning, Pa strapped the bundle of furs on his shoulders and started to walk to town. There were so many furs to carry that he could not take his gun. Ma was worried, but Pa said that by starting before sunup and walking very fast all day, he could get home again before dark. The nearest town was far away. Laura and Mary had never seen a town. They had never even seen a store. They had never even seen 2 houses standing together. But they knew that in a town there were many houses and a store full of candy and calico and other wonderful things, powder and shot and salt and store sugar. They knew that Pa would trade his furs to the storekeeper for beautiful things from town, and all day they were expecting the presents he would bring to them. Then, when the sun sank low above the treetops and no more drops fell from the tips of the icicles, they began to watch eagerly for Paul. The sun sank out of sight, the woods grew dark, and he did not come. Ma started supper and set the table, but he did not come. It was time to do the chores, and still he had not come. Ma said that Laura might come with her while she milked the cow. Laura could carry the lantern. So Laura put on her coat and Ma buttoned it up, and Laura put her hands into her red mittens that hung by a red yarn string around her neck, while Ma lighted the candle in the lantern. Laura was proud to be helping Ma with the milking, and she carried the lantern very carefully. Its sides were of tin with places cut in them for a candle light to shine through. When Laura walked behind Ma on the path to the barn, the little bits of the candlelight from the lantern leaped all the way around her on the snow. The night was not yet quite dark. The woods were dark, and there was a grey light on the snowy path, and in the sky there were a few faint stars. The stars did not look as warm and bright as the little lights that came from the lantern. Laura was surprised to see the dark shape of the Suki, the brown cow, standing in the barnyard gate. Ma was surprised too. It was too early in the spring for Suki to be left out into the big woods to eat grass. She lived in the barn, but sometimes on warm days Pa left the door of her stall open so she could come into the barnyard. Now Ma and Laura saw her behind the bars waiting for them. Ma went up to the gate and pushed against it to open it, but it did not open very far because there was Suki standing against it. Ma said, "Suki, get over!" She reached across the gate and slapped Suki's shoulder. Just then, one of the dancing little bits of light from the lantern jumped between the bars of the gate, and Laura saw long, shaggy black fur and two little glittering eyes. Suki had thin, short brown fur. Suki had large, gentle eyes. Ma said, "Laura, walk back to the house." So Laura turned around again and began to walk toward the house. Ma came behind her. When they had gone part way, Ma snatched her up, lantern and all, and ran. Ma ran with her into the house and slammed the door. Then Laura said, "Ma, was it a bear?" "Yes, Laura," Ma said, "it was a bear." Laura began to cry. She hung on to Ma and sobbed, "Oh, will he eat Suki?" "No," Ma said, hugging her. "Suki is safe in the barn. Think, Laura, all those big heavy logs in the barn walls, and the door is heavy and solid, made to keep bears out. No, the bear cannot get in and eat Suki." Laura felt better then. "But he could have hurt us, couldn't he?" she asked. "He didn't hurt us," Ma said. "You were a good girl, Laura, to do exactly as I told you and to do it quickly without asking why." Ma was trembling and she began to laugh a little. "To think," she said, "I've slapped a bear." And then she put supper on the table for Laura and Mary. Pa had not come yet. He didn't come. Laura and Mary were undressed, and they said their prayers and snuggled into the trundle bed. Ma sat by the lamp mending one of Pa's shirts. The house seemed cold and still and strange without Pa. Laura listened to the wind in the big woods. All around the house the wind kept crying as though it were lost in the dark and the cold. The wind sounded frightened. Ma finished mending the shirt. Laura saw her fold it slowly and carefully, and she smoothed it with her hand. Then she did a thing that she had never done before. She went to the door and pulled the leather hatch string through its hole in the door, so that nobody could get in from the outside unless she lifted the hatch. She came and took Carrie, all limp and sleeping, out of the big bed. She saw that Laura and Mary were still awake, and she said to them, "Go to sleep, girls. Everything is all right. Pa will be here in the morning." And then she went back to her rocking chair and sat there rocking gently and holding baby Carrie in her arms. She was sitting up late waiting for Pa, and Laura and Mary meant to stay awake too, till he came. But at last they went to sleep. In the morning, Pa was there. He had brought candy for Laura and Mary and 2 pieces of pretty calico to make them each a dress. Mary's was a china blue pattern on a white ground, and Laura's was dark red with little golden brown dots on it. Ma had calico for a dress too. It was brown with a big feathery white pattern all over it. They were all happy because Pa had such good prices for his furs that he could afford to get them such beautiful presents. The tracks of the big bear were all round the barn, and there were marks of his claws on the walls, but Suki and the horses were all safe inside. All the day the sun shone, the snow melted, and the little streams of water ran from the icicles, which all the time grew thinner. Before the sun set that night, the bear tracks were only shapeless marks in the wet, soft snow. After supper, Paul took Laura and Mary on his knees, and he said he had a new story to tell them. The story of Paul and the bear in the way. When I went to town yesterday with the furs I had found it hard walking in the snow. It took me a long time to get to town, and the other men with furs had come in earlier to do their trading. The storekeeper was busy, and I had to wait until he could look at my furs. Then he had to bargain about the price of each one, and then I had to pick out the things I wanted to take in the trade. So it went nearly sundown before I could start home. I tried to hurry, but the walking was hard and I was tired, so I had not gone far before night came, and I was alone in the big woods without my gun. There was still 6 miles to walk, and I came along as fast as I could. The night grew darker and darker, and I wished for my gun, because I knew that some of the bears had come out of their winter dens. I had seen their tracks when I went to town in the morning. Bears are hungry and cross at this time of year. You know they have been sleeping in their dens all winter long with nothing to eat, and that makes them thin and angry when they wake up. I did not want to meet one. I hurried along as quick as I could in the dark. By and by the stars gave a little light. It was still black as pitch where the woods were thick, but in the open places I could see dimly. I could see the snowy road ahead a little way, and I could see the dark woods standing all round me. I was glad when I came upon an open place where the stars gave me this faint light. All the time I was watching as well as I could for bears. I was listening for the sounds they make when they go carelessly through the bushes. Then I came again into an open place, and there, right in the middle of the road, I saw a big black bear. He was standing up on his hind legs, looking at me. I could see his eyes shine. I could see his pig snout. I could even see one of his claws in the starlight. My scalp prickled, and my hair stood straight up. I stopped in my tracks and stood still. The bear did not move. There he stood looking at me. I knew it would be no good to try and go around him. He would follow me into the dark woods where he could see me better than I could. I did not want to fight a winter-starved bear in the dark. Oh, how I wished for my gun. I had to pass that bear to get home. I thought that if I could scare him, he might get out of the road and let me go by. But I took a deep breath, and suddenly I shouted with all my might and ran at him, waving my arms. He didn't move. I did not run very far toward him, I tell you. I stopped and looked at him, and he stood looking at me, and then I shouted again. There he stood. I kept on shouting and waving my arms, but he did not budge. Well, it would do me no good to run away. There were other bears in the woods. I might meet one any time. I might as well deal with this one as with another. Besides, I was coming home to Ma and you girls. I would never get here if I ran away from everything in the woods. That scared me. So at last I looked round, and I got a good big club, a solid heavy branch that had been broken from a tree by the weight of the snow in the winter. I lifted it up with my hands, and I ran straight at that bear. I swung my club as hard as I could and brought it down, bang, on his head. And there he stood, for he was nothing but a big black burned stump. I had passed it on my way to town that morning. It wasn't a bear at all. I only thought it was a bear because I had been thinking all the time about bears and being afraid I'd meet one. It really wasn't a bear at all, Mary asked. No, Mary, it wasn't a bear at all. There I had been yelling and dancing and waving my arms all by myself in the big woods, trying to scare a stump. Laura said, ours was really a bear, but we were not scared because we thought it was Suki. Paul did not say anything, but he hugged her tighter. Ooh, that bear might have eaten Ma and me all up, Laura said, snuggling closer to him. But Ma walked right up to him and slapped him, and he didn't do anything at all. Why didn't he do anything? I guess he was too surprised to do anything, Laura, Paul said. I guess he was afraid when the lantern shone in his eyes, and when Ma walked up to him and slapped him, he knew she wasn't afraid. Well, you were brave too, Laura said. Even if it was only a stump, you thought it was a bear. You'd have hit him on the head with a club if he had been a bear, wouldn't you, Paul? Yes, Paul said, I would. You see, I had to. And then Ma said it was bedtime. She helped Laura and Mary undress and button up their red flannel nightgowns. They knelt down by the trundle bed and said their prayers. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. Ma kissed them both and tucked the covers in around them. They lay there a while, looking at Ma's smooth, parted hair and her hands busy with sewing in the lamplight. Her needle made little clicking sounds against her thimble, and then the thread went softly swish through the pretty calico that Pa had traded furs for. Laura looked at Pa, who was greasing his boots, his mustache and his hair and his long brown, 2 big bears' beard was silky in the lamplight, and the colors of his plaid jacket were gay. He whistled cheerfully while he worked, and then he sang, "The birds were singing in the morning, and the myrtle and the ivy were in bloom, and the sun o'er the hills was a-dawning. 'Twas then that I laid her in the tomb." It was a warm night. The fire had gone to coals on the hearth, and Pa did not build it up. All round the little house in the big woods there were little sounds of falling snow, and from the eaves there was the drip drip of the melting icicles. In just a little while the trees would be putting out their baby leaves, all rosy and yellow and pale green, and there would be wildflowers and birds in the woods. Then there would be no more stories by the fire at night, but all day long Laura and Mary would run and play among the trees, for it would be spring. Okay, so I shall be back tomorrow and we'll read chapters 7, 8, and I think we might read 9 as well. But I'm really, really excited, and I hope that you're enjoying this story of Little House in the Big Woods. And as always, I'm most affably yours until my next swim. Cheers, darlings. Toodle pip.